She stepped off the train barefoot, letter trembling in her hand. Before anyone welcomed her, a small voice asked if she belonged. The station held the last warmth of autumn. Yellow leaves stuck to the planks. Smoke curled from the locomotive and drifted over faces turned elsewhere. She stood at the edge of the platform, dark hair loose from the ride, brown dress dusted white at the hem. The letter said her name, a county, a time to arrive. It did not promise a door. No one hurried to claim her. Men moved with freight and talk. A woman counted coins. A dog slept under a bench. The conductor tipped his cap and forgot her. She sat, the boards cool under bare feet, and folded the letter again along the same crease until it remembered her hands. The words inside were plain. A rancher needed a wife. A child needed a mother. Room and board and a fair start. Ink that thrift had made small. She had read it so often the loops had grown thin. On the long nights of deciding, those thin loops had looked like paths. Now the air smelled of iron and apples and someone else's soup. She watched dust spin in a shaft of light and felt the old fear lean hard on her ribs. What if the letter had arrived and the man had changed his mind? What if it had never arrived at all? A small shape stopped in front of her shoes. A girl. Light hair pulled to one side with a frayed ribbon. Navy dress too warm for the day. In her arms a patch bare, one ear mended with a crooked heart of someone's careful thread. The girl did not blink at the sight of a stranger. She looked at the letter, then at the woman's face, then at the empty space beside her on the bench. Her hand squeezed the bear once, as if to share courage. "Hungry?" the woman asked softly, voice cracked from travel. It came out like a memory. The girl shook her head. Not no, not yes. She shifted closer until the bear's paw brushed the woman's knee. Around them boots thudded, and the lamp over the ticket window buzzed like a trapped bee. A long coat moved at the far post. A man in a hat watched without pressing near. Broad shoulders, dust on his cuffs. He checked the clock, then the track, then the girl, and stayed where he was. She felt the weight of that gaze and set the letter face down on her lap. The girl held out something small, a peanut wrapped in old paper, a treasure that had learned to be a gift. The woman blinked, took it, and smiled in the way tired people do. Slow, careful, not to frighten the strange good in front of them. "What's your name?" she asked. The girl's lips shaped a sound too soft to catch. She turned the bear so it could listen too. Then she leaned close, as if a secret needed the shortest road. "Can you be my mama?" she whispered. The question came like a warm wind after a hard winter. It lifted nothing visible and moved everything that mattered. The woman looked down at the letter on her knees, the one that had asked less of her than this, and felt the paper become only paper. Beyond them, the rancher in the hat shifted his weight. He had the stance of a man used to open land and fewer words than most days require. He took one step, then stopped again, as if the distance between him and the bench needed a decision larger than his boots. The woman did not reach for the girl. She reached for the bear's mended ear and smoothed the crooked heart with a thumb. The girl did not step back. She stood steady, as if promises were made of stillness. "I don't know," the woman said, but the words did not sound like refusal. They sounded like a door set gently on its hinges. Wind ran along the platform and gathered the leaves into a small storm. The girl balanced on her toes and watched the woman's mouth as if it could tell the weather. The man in the hat took another step. Close now. He removed the hat. The line of sun slid off his brow and left his face bare of shadow. He did not smile. He did not offer a hand. He looked at the girl first and what her boldness had done to the day. Then he met the woman's eyes in their miles. "You came," he said, voice rough from use elsewhere. She lifted the folded letter and held it between them like proof that something had been agreed. He looked at it and then at the bare feet, and then at the bag made of too much mending. "Train late," he said, as if apology could be that small. "Only a little," she answered, and the words did not shake now. The girl tugged his sleeve, not to ask permission, but to remind him she was the one who had started this. He nodded to her, slow, as a man nods to weather that has chosen to bless him. He looked at the woman again. "Name's Eli," he said. "This is June." June pressed the bear to her chest and stood taller by a thumb's width. The woman's throat tightened at the sight. Names made things stay. She rose. The bench lifted its weight from her legs. She tucked the letter into her bodice, careful with the crease. Eli watched her do it and looked away, polite in the way men are who remember what pain has cost them. House is a ways, he said. Wagon's there. He pointed. The wagon stood plain behind the post, bed swept clean, a folded blanket at the near corner. Someone had thought to bring it. Someone had chosen softness at the start. June reached for the woman's hand. Small fingers, warm, certain. The woman did not take it at once. She looked at Eli. He did not nod. He did not speak. He waited. She set her hand into June's and felt the sure grip of a person who has already decided not to let go. They walked, boots and bare feet. The platform boards knocked a hollow drum under them. A man at the telegraph clicked out a string of Elsewhere. A woman smoothed her skirt and pretended not to watch. The conductor shouted a time, and the engine sighed, and the day kept its shape. At the wagon, Eli set her satchel beside the folded blanket. He tied it with a short knot, practical and neat. The knot told her more about him than his face had yet. He lifted June to the seat and waited until the girl had settled the bear, then offered the woman a hand up. She placed her palm in his and felt work-old skin, the strength that comes from fences and prayer shaped into the same motion. Steady, lifted, let go. They rode. The town fell behind with its signs and its people, who make every heart a story they can pass along. Trees took over, then the open ground. The road cut between fields the color of coin, and then turned to scrub where wind wrote its own language. June sat near the woman, shoulder pressed to her arm, as if proximity could finish the question she had asked. The bear watched the horizon with its crooked heart listening for answers. Eli drove like a man who had learned not to rush. The reins lay easy in his hands. He checked the woman's posture only once, and then angled the wagon to avoid a rut that would have jostled her more than he liked. Care taken as if by habit, not effort. They stopped at a stream that had chosen to keep a little water in a wide year. Eli set down a tin cup. The woman drank. June dipped the bear's paw and whirled it until drops glittered around them. The woman laughed under her breath. It startled the birds nearby into a slow, approving rise. Long ride? Eli asked. Long enough, she said. He nodded. He tipped water over the wheel hubs and watched it run clear. He glanced at June's wet boots, at the woman's bare feet, at the letter edge peeking like a white leaf at her collar. He turned toward the wagon as if motion could carry him past the part where men speak what they fear. They went on. The land stretched into its own rule. The road narrowed to two lines cut into confidence. Eli pointed once where cattle would cross in spring. June whispered the names of things she loved. The cottonwood, the red rock, the hawk that stitched the sky with its slow wing. The woman stored each name somewhere near her ribs. At last the ranch showed. Not big, not proud, a house that had chosen endurance, a porch that leaned a little, a corral with one good gate and one that would need his attention soon, a rope on the well worn to the shape of hands. Eli drew the horses to a stop. He did not say, "Welcome." He left room for the word to arrive if it chose. June jumped down and ran to the steps, then turned back, bear lifted high like a flag. The woman climbed after her, slower. She placed her foot on the first plank and felt it hold. Inside, the house waited without judgment. Air cool from shade. A table washed clean earlier than this morning. A chair pulled out a hand's breadth. A shelf where someone had set 3 cups side by side and left room for a 4th. June let the bear sit at the table. She climbed into the chair beside it and folded her hands on its patched head. Eli set the kettle on, movements neat, measured. The woman stood near the door, not yet in, not ready to leave. She touched the frame with 2 fingers, a habit from somewhere that believed in thresholds. The wood was warm from afternoon. "Stay a while," Eli said. Not command, invitation shaped by a man who rarely invites. She nodded. She crossed the room and placed the letter on the shelf beside the cups. June watched her do it with approval, too large for her small face. The kettle began to whisper. Eli struck a match and let the flame tell the stove what to do. The woman smoothed the skirt across her knees, felt the ridges of old stitches, and breathed. June leaned against her side, head finding a place as if it had been measured long ago. Outside, wind shifted the leaves. Somewhere, a fence wire sang its one low note. Inside, the house learned 3 heartbeats, then 4 with the kettle, and decided to keep them. Night would bring its old questions. Tomorrow would bring work. For now, a small hand held firm to a larger one, and a letter sat where cups do, and a man moved through his kitchen as if he had always made room for 2 extra plates. And the woman, who had arrived ready to be turned away, felt the first light weight of belonging settle on her shoulders like a shawl she had not expected to find. The first night carried more silence than words. The house had walls that remembered quiet. They took in the sound of boots, the light scrape of a chair, the kettle's whistle. Everything else stayed unspoken. She lay on a narrow bed near the small window, quilt patched from years of use. Through the glass, she saw a slice of stars, cold and steady. Her satchel sat on the floor, unopened. The letter lay on the shelf in the kitchen where she had placed it, where he had not touched it. That small fact let her breathe easier. June had fallen asleep quickly, curled with her patch bare. She breathed soft, a whistle of air through a nose touched once by fever. The woman listened to it in the dark and felt a pull, one she didn't fight. At dawn, the ranch woke, not with bells or calls, but with work. Eli stepped outside before the sky was clear. The door clicked, the dog padded after him, and the yard took on the sound of a man who knew his routine. She rose before she had to. The floorboards creaked under bare feet. The basin water was cold, but it cleared her face of travel. She tied her hair with a ribbon she had saved since girlhood and smoothed her dress. The color had faded to plain earth, but it was clean. When she came to the kitchen, June was already there, hair tangled, bare in hand. She reached up to the woman without words, as if she had done it every morning of her life. The woman lifted her, set her on the chair, and poured milk into a cup. June smiled into it like it was the finest gift. Eli stepped back in, arms marked by fence work, shirt damp with early sweat. He looked at the table. 2 cups sat, one for him, one for the child. A third stood there too, already filled. He stopped a moment, then sat. They ate bread that had gone a day stale, but softened in warm milk. June dipped her crust and hummed. The woman chewed slow, steady, as if remembering what a table was for. Eli ate like a man who worked, efficient, without pause. But his eyes lifted once, just once, at the sight of the child leaning her head against the woman's sleeve, as though she had always done so. When the meal was finished, he pushed his plate back. His chair legs scraped. He did not thank her with words, but with the smallest nod. She understood. In places like this, gratitude lived in action. The day unfolded with work. She swept the floor, shook the dust from curtains that had not been touched in months, washed the cups until they shone faintly. Her hands found labor without needing direction. June followed her with the bear, copying each motion. A broom made from willow twigs became a second broom in the girl's hands. Together they made the house breathe again. From the yard came the ring of Eli's hammer. A post had rotted. He dug it out, sweat shining on his back, hat tilted low. She watched through the window once, not long. Just enough to see the way his body bore weight like a mule that had never known rest. At midday, he brought in a pail of water. He paused when he saw the swept floor, the clean windows, the bed of herbs she had started near the porch. His brow lifted just slightly. He set the pail down and drank. The cold ran down his throat. Then he tipped the cup her way, silent offer. She drank too. The water tasted of iron and stone, but it steadied her. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, the way she had done since childhood. Eli noticed but said nothing. The afternoon carried heat. She hung linens, June beside her, with clothespins too big for her fingers. They laughed when the wind stole one, tumbling across the yard like a fleeing rabbit. Eli caught it without effort and set it back, eyes lowering at their laughter. He didn't join in, but he did not walk away either. Toward evening, clouds rose over the hills. The sky bruised purple, wind sharp with dust. Eli moved the horses to shelter, tightened the barn doors. She brought June inside, shuttered the windows. Rain came sudden, hard, drumming on the roof like fists. The girl pressed close to her side, bear gripped tight. She wrapped an arm around her and rocked her without thought. The child's fear eased into sleep, her breath slowing. Eli stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his hat brim, shirt clinging to his frame. He saw them, woman and child folded together on the small bed, the bear tucked between. For a long moment, he didn't move. His chest rose once, slow, as if something heavy inside him shifted. He turned away before she could look up. His boots tracked water across the floor. But she heard the pause in his step, the kind of pause that says a man feels what he will not yet admit. When the storm passed, the air smelled of wet earth and cedar. The land drank. The night cooled. She lay awake longer than she wished. June curled at her side and thought of the girl's question. "Can you be my mama?" The words pressed against her heart, steady as rain on a roof. And though she had no answer, her arms had already given one. Morning found them in a rhythm that did not need teaching. Eli took the yard. She took the rooms. June drifted between, bear tucked under one arm, copying whatever hands she trusted did first. She began with small things, jars scrubbed and labeled by sight, beans, flour, salt. A rag hung to dry near the stove so it would be there when the kettle cried. The broom bristles trimmed square. No new lace, no show, only order. June sat on the floor, knees under her dress, tracing letters in flour dust she had spilled on purpose. The woman drew a shape with her finger and said the sound. June repeated, solemn, as if a vow were being made inside the noise. The bear watched, stitched ear turned like it could hear too. Eli returned at noon with a hare and a handful of wild onions. He set them on the table and stepped back, palms open, an offering without speech. She cleaned the meat, browned it, thickened the broth with flour and patience. June stood on a stool to stir once, careful, tongue caught between her teeth. The smell filled the house. Eli ate without comment, but his bowl emptied first. After, he carried water without being asked. Thanks spoke in buckets. In the afternoon, shade reached the porch. She mended socks there, feet bare, toes pressed to the warm board. June brushed the bear's fur with a twig and told it secrets. Eli fixed tools on the step, shoulders loose for the first time since she had come. The quiet did not press anymore. It lay down beside them. She opened no closed doors. The room with the narrow bed stayed latched. A blue shawl hung on a peg inside that door, visible through the crack when wind found it. She never touched it. But once, when the house slept, she stood with her palm on the wood and let stillness pass between her and what had been here before. A trip to town could not be avoided. Sugar had gone low, thread nearly out. Eli hitched the wagon. The woman washed June's face and tied her hair with the same ribbon she had used on her own that first morning. They rode with the sun at their backs, dust lifting in small puffs that fell again, where hooves said so. Main Street watched, eyes counted, tongues measured. A woman at the pump turned the handle slower when they passed. The storekeeper's smile slid, then fixed. He wrapped sugar careless and charged a penny do brave. Eli laid exact coin on the counter and waited until the man looked ashamed of his own math. June pressed against the woman's skirt, bare peeking from the fabric like it too had decided which side of this door it stood on. On the way out, a boy muttered a word men use for women they do not know but want to judge. The woman did not change her step. June's fingers tightened. Eli's jaw set. He touched his hat to no one and kept the wagon straight. The town learned nothing new that day and talked anyway. They reached home quiet. She stored the sugar, set the thread with the needle tin, and pulled the shade a little lower than usual. June took the bear to the porch and told it that sometimes people did not use their best voices. The bear agreed by keeping still. Work filled the space gossip could not. She taught June to wash cups without breaking them. Eli taught June to pour grain without wasting it. The girl listened seriously to both, a small soldier with a patched command. Night brought a cold edge. She pulled the quilt higher over June and hummed a line she had learned as a child, the tune slow and even as breath on glass. Eli paused in the doorway at the sound, the stove glow drawing a thin line along his cheek. He stood there longer than a man needs to stand to check a latch. He turned away when her voice broke and started again, lower. The next day June fell. Nothing big. Dirt, a scuff, a cry that rose fast and stopped too soon. The woman washed the scrape and blew on it, then cut a strip from the hem of her own dress and tied it neat around the small knee. June studied the knot like a miracle. Eli watched from the yard and did not come inside until his eyes could hold steady. The woman began a ledger by the door. Not numbers. Tasks. A list that said more than it wrote. Eggs, well rope, porch step, fence south corner. Thanks owed to someone unnamed. Eli added 2 words at the bottom in his square hand. June's boots. He did not say where the money would come from. He only wrote what needed writing. She touched the letters once with a fingertip and smiled where no one could see. Rain held off. Heat held on. The land wore its thirst like a badge that meant something. Eli walked fence alone one afternoon and came back late, hat in hand, face salt white. A post had gone, and with it a stretch of wire. Coyotes had found a calf. He sat on the step, elbows on knees, eyes on his boots. The woman filled a cup and set it near, not asking. He drank, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and stood with the slow push of a man who belongs to work as much as work belongs to him. He took the coil of wire. She lifted the hammer. He paused. He let her carry it to the gate. They fixed that corner together. Eli tamped ground. She held the post steady, shoulders trembling by the last inch. June stood with the bear and kept count in numbers that ran out at 5 and started again. When the wire sang true, the 3 of them stepped back and listened. Triumph does not always make noise. Sometimes it's the absence of what was wrong. After, June fell asleep on the woman's lap, while the late light made dust look like gold trying to remember where it came from. The woman didn't move. Eli cut apples thin and set a piece at the edge of the plate, to be taken without waking the child. The woman ate it there, careful not to spill. Eli watched the smallest curve of her mouth lift and let his breath go slow. A letter came for Eli in a hand the postman called respectable. He read it once at the table, folded it, set it under the cup, and went to the yard. The woman did not ask. June asked if the bear could learn to read letters if they were left near his ear. The woman said yes. That night she placed the folded page beside the patched head and left it there until morning. Days made a rope and wrapped around them. Work and rest, wind and stillness, hurt and mending. The house picked up the pattern and kept it. One evening the woman found a small box on the porch rail. Inside a pair of boots, June-sized, scuffed but soles sound. Eli must have traded for them in town when he had gone alone. He said nothing. He watched as June tried them, toes testing the new weight. The girl walked the length of the porch and back, serious with pride, then went down the steps and touched each stone like it could tell her the time. The woman's eyes shone in the way light does before rain. Later at the basin, the woman washed June's old shoes and set them on the sill to dry. Not because they were needed now, because some things deserve to finish right. That night, when the lamp burned low, June woke and climbed onto the woman's narrow bed. She pressed her cheek to the brown dress and whispered into the cloth, so soft even the house almost missed it. Don't leave. The woman lay still a long time. The quilt rose and fell. Outside, a nighthawk cut the dark and was gone. She put her hand on the child's hair, fingers gentle as if learning a new prayer. She looked toward the door where Eli's shadow crossed once, then stilled. I'm here, she said at last. Not promise, presence. Morning found June's boots by the door, ready. Eli's coat hung beside them, and for the first time it did not look like the garment of a widower. It looked like a thing set out for use. The woman carried water, balanced and sure. Eli opened the gate. June trotted through, bare under one arm, ready to count fence posts again. They crossed the yard shoulder to shoulder, not touching, not needing to. The house let them go and waited to take them back. The list by the door had 3 new lines. At the bottom, in the woman's hand, 2 words added under June's boots. Stay anyway. She did not call Eli to read it. He saw it when he returned for the hammer and did not smile. But he set his palm on the board beside those words and left it there long enough for the grain to learn his heat. Then he lifted the tool, glanced toward the porch where June marched in her new boots, and walked out into the day with the look of a man who has found good work that will not be taken. The sun climbed higher each day, laying itself heavy on the ranch. Work pressed harder. Fences leaned, roofs creaked, and the garden begged for water that never came. Yet in the center of it all, there was a steadiness none of them had owned before. The woman rose with dawn, hair bound back, hands ready. June followed with her patch-barren boots that scuffed proudly on the floorboards. Eli moved ahead of them both, shoulders bent with labor, but less alone now. One morning she found him in the barn, fighting with a bulky hinge on the stall. His jaw was set, hammer striking too hard, too fast. She stepped inside, the cool air smelling of hay and horse. Without words, she took the nail from his palm, placed it straight, and held the board steady. His hand brushed hers, rough against rough, and for a beat, neither moved. He let go first, but when the hammer fell again, the stall held true. He looked at her, not long, just enough. She returned the look, and that was the conversation. June clapped, small hands echoing like bells in the wooden space. The bear nodded from her grip. A hinge, nothing more. But the barn carried the sound of 3 people working, not 2. By late afternoon, heat pulled every shadow thin. The woman washed clothes at the stream, sleeves rolled, feet sunk in mud that cooled the ache. June splashed beside her, giggling as if water were treasure. When Eli came with the wagon to load timber, he stopped at the sight. A smile almost broke, but he swallowed it back, turning to his work. Still, his step lightened. She saw. That evening, a storm climbed the horizon. Thunder muttered like old anger, and the sky tore itself open. They pulled shutters closed, tied down tools, and brought in the horse. Inside, the lamp shook on its chain. June huddled against the woman, eyes wide. Eli checked the latch twice, then leaned against the door, as if his weight alone could keep the storm out. The woman sang, not a hymn, not a song meant for company. Just a tune hummed low, born of some long-ago cradle. June's fear softened. Eli's shoulders lowered. The storm passed, but the sound stayed. The next day carried proof of what storms leave. A fence down, branches scattered. They worked together. Eli lifted posts. She steadied wire. June carried nails in a tin, offering them with solemn pride. Sweat lined every face. Dirt clung to every hand. At the end, when the gate closed with a true click, Eli said the first words longer than orders since she had come. Good. She nodded. That was enough. But night brought something harder. June coughed deep, fevered, cheeks flushed too bright. The woman held her, cloth pressed cool against her head. Eli paced, silent, fists tight at his sides. He fetched water, stoked the fire, stood useless and aching. Hours stretched. The child whimpered, called for a mother she had not known until now. The woman whispered back, rocking her slow, steady. She did not sleep. Eli watched from the shadows, face carved sharp by worry. At last, near dawn, the fever broke, sweat dampening June's hair. Her breathing evened. She slept heavy, safe. The woman sagged in relief. Eli crouched beside her. Their shoulders brushed, both bent over the girl. His hand hovered, then settled, light, careful, on the child's small arm. For the first time, they sat close, without walls between. She's strong, the woman murmured. Like her mama, he said, voice rough. She looked at him. He didn't mean the one in the grave. He meant the one here, holding the child. Dawn bled pale through the cracks. June stirred, pressed her cheek into the woman's dress, and smiled in her sleep. Eli stood slowly, looking at them both. He turned to the window, back straight, jaw firm, as if facing down something greater than any storm. That day when work began, he left the hammer on the porch for her, not as a test, but as belonging. The house carried 3 shadows now, and though none had said it aloud, the air inside felt more like family than contract. Morning came without hurry. The storm's smell had left the ground. The house held the soft noises of a place that had learned its people. Water into a basin, a spoon on a tin plate, June's boots finding their rhythm on the floorboards. The woman braided her dark hair tight and tied it with the same ribbon. Eli checked the latch once, not twice. The day waited. A rider from town brought dust and a letter. He left both at the gate. Eli set the paper on the table and stood back, hat in his hands. She broke the seal with a nail she had smoothed on a stone long before this place knew her. The words were business, the kind that counts miles as if they were debts. Report to the agent. Date lapsed. Placement uncertain. Return fare owed or remitted by employing party. Ink with no room for names. She read it through and again. Her hand did not shake, but the breath under it did. She folded the page once and slid it under the edge of the kettle. It made a small unevenness that the kettle would ride all day. June climbed onto her chair and fed the bear a crumb with ceremony. Eli watched the woman's face, then looked away, jaw set. Work began anyway. He took the fence pliers. She took the broom. June took the task of counting nails. The line of noon cut across the yard and kept going. Near the cottonwood, Eli set a post and leaned on it longer than the soil required. He returned with his palms scraped. She saw. She did not name it. By afternoon, the decision had followed her from room to room. It lived in the satchel as she laid out the few things that were only hers. A dress folded flat, a packet of pins, a scrap of paper where she had once written a line, and then rubbed it away with a thumb. She set the satchel by the door and did not touch it again. Eli came in, hands raw, eyes on the floorboards and then on the satchel, and then on nothing at all. He crossed to the stove, lifted the kettle, felt the wobble under it, and found the letter. He did not read the lines. He had read enough like them in other rooms years back, when words tried to tell him what to do with his dead. He turned the paper once in his fingers and set it down flat. He walked out without speaking. In the yard, he went to the woodpile and chose a board of cedar, clean-grained, light. He brought it in and placed it on the table. He set the pencil beside it. He did not look at her hand. He looked at June, who stood very still because she understood something was being built that she could not carry. The woman traced the grain with a fingertip. She printed June first, straight, careful. Then below, she wrote her own name, the one she had not heard spoken in a long time. It looked smaller than it felt. She didn't add the ranchers yet. She lifted her eyes to Eli. He took the pencil like a tool that still had to prove itself and wrote Eli at the left edge. Not larger, not bold, just true. The board looked like a quiet sentence waiting for its verb. He set 2 nails on the table. He carried the plank to the door and held it against the beam above the threshold where the light came through most days. She stood on the step and pressed the wood straight with her palm. June held the second nail in both hands as if it were a ring. Eli drove the first home, the second too. The house took the sound. The cedar warmed under their touch. June read the names aloud as far as she could and stopped at the woman's, head tilted, as if listening for what came next. The woman put her hand over the last letter and left it there until her skin learned the grain. Evening found them on the porch. Wind moved the herb bed she had planted by the steps. The dog slept with his head on the top stair, as if he'd claimed the height for them. Eli brought out a small tin and set it down. Inside lay a circle of braided horsehair, fine and dark, ends bound with 2 loops of wire hammered flat. Not a ring made for church, a thing made by hands when they have no jeweler and still want to mark a bond. He did not offer it with words. He laid it on the porch rail where her eye would find it when she was ready. He turned and went to fix the latch that had begun to catch again, just to be doing something, while the ground under them changed its mind. June saw the tin and looked at the woman and then at the door beam and then at Eli's shoulders. She climbed onto the chair, set the bear facing the rail like a witness, and waited. The woman lifted the braid. It was lighter than she expected. She wrapped it around her wrist and felt it settle there, as if it had been measuring her all along. She closed her hand. Eli stopped at the hammer's fall and turned. His eyes found her wrist, and for a breath the yard held no work at all. Night came, soft, earned. Inside she took the letter from under the kettle. She tore it into lengths and then into small squares. Careful, slow, making sure the edges didn't snag on any thought she would regret. Eli opened the stove. Together they fed the fire with a thing that had never belonged to this house. The flames took it without ceremony. June watched from her chair and nodded, because children understand burning better than adults. They did not celebrate. They made supper. Bread, onions, a pan of beans blessed by the last of the fat saved in a jar. June fell asleep with the bear across her chest and a streak of flour on her cheek. Eli carried her to the small bed, and the woman smoothed the hair from the girl's brow once, then once more for what the act had cost her to hold back until now. When the house was quiet, Eli opened the door to the south room, the one that had stayed latched. The blue shawl still hung on its peg, lighter than air at the edges. He took it down, weighed it, and then folded it in half and laid it not back on the peg, but in the wooden chest at the foot of the narrow bed. He closed the lid. He set the key on the shelf where the cup stood. He did not say goodbye. He had done that already. He only made room. He came back to the kitchen and found the woman at the table with the ledger she had started. Not numbers. Tasks. She had added 2 words at the bottom. Tomorrow. Stay. She closed the book and slid it under the cedar board where the names lived. He touched the edge. His hand stayed there a moment longer than habit. At dawn, they rode to the cottonwood down by the stream, just the 3 of them, not to meet a preacher. The land would do. Eli held the reins loosely. The horse knew the way. June wore the boots he had found for her and jumped every other stone to keep score. Under the tree, dew held on the grass like a secret that wanted telling. The woman stood with her brown dress caught up out of the wet and the horsehair braid dark on her wrist. Eli took off his hat. He looked at her, then at June, then at the space between, which had shrunk to the size of a breath. He spoke 4 words, not a question, not a command. If you'll have us. The woman turned her palm up and showed the braid. She did not answer with words. She stepped forward and placed her hand on his chest, where a heart lives when it refuses to quit. He covered her hand with his, rough over soft, and held it there until the wind found them and said enough. June wrapped both arms around their legs and the bear bumped their knees. The 3 of them stood until the sun made them move. They walked back slow, a little shy, as if they were learning a new way to use their bodies in the same old world. At the porch, the woman reached for the cedar board and, below the names, wrote 1 more word in a steady hand. Home, then drew a short line under it that rose at the end. June clapped once. Eli watched the pencil lift and set back without shaking. That evening, they ate on the steps because the day had been a good one, and the house liked to hear them. The spoon chime the woman had made from bent silver talked when the wind leaned in. Eli set his boots beside June's by the door. Her satchel hung on the peg above them, empty, the strap worn shiny where it had been held too hard too many miles. It could stay. It had nowhere else to be. When dark settled, Eli checked the latch and then, for the first time since any of them could remember, left the door open to the screen and the screen unhooked. The air moved through as if it had been waiting for permission. June slept easy. The woman stood at the threshold, fingers on the beam. Eli came to her side and set his fingers there too, just below hers, just like that other evening when ash had marked their height. Now the wood learned a different warmth. In the quiet, June turned over, found the patched ear of her bear, and breathed the way children breathe when the world is finally arranged in a shape they can trust. The woman leaned her shoulder into Eli's and let her weight rest. He did not shift away. Outside, a coyote called and another answered. The house kept its answer to itself. The cedar board held its names. The braid held its circle. The kettle sat level again. Nothing spectacular. Nothing loud. Just 3 lives deciding to pull the same direction. When the lamp went low, the woman pressed a kiss to June's hair, and then to her open palm, closing the tiny hand around the touch as if it could be saved for later. She set that hand back on the bear and turned toward the table where Eli had left his knife and the whetstone. She sat opposite him. He slid the stone across, and she took her turn. The blade came bright and honest. They said nothing. They didn't need to. Morning would ask for all of them again, as it should. Fences, water, bread, boots by the door in a line that made sense. If anyone in town wanted a different story, they could write it and keep it. This one would be lived here. The mail-order bride who thought no one wanted her watched the man and the child who did not know how to ask for her learn instead how to keep her. And when June woke just before sleep took the house and whispered into the cotton of the brown dress, "Mama," the woman answered the way she had meant to answer all along. "I'm here."